Brian here from Tracks in the Box again. In this video, we're going to take a look at a really unique plugin from SKNote called SoundBrigade. SKNote describes it as a brigade of filters with a mission: tame resonances, control frequency spectrum, enhance. It's one of those tools that, on first glance, you might not know what you would do with it. But if you spend a little time with it, you'll quickly find out that it can do the sorts of things you normally do with compression or EQ, but in a different way and oftentimes with better results. It's not a dynamic EQ or a multi-band compressor, but it's kind of in the same ballpark. There are 5 missions that represent different algorithms, and we'll go through those in a minute. But using SoundBrigade is as simple as choosing a mission, selecting a frequency range, and setting the threshold. With just these few controls, you can do a lot with this plugin. Working left to right, you've got threshold and makeup gain, then a tilt control, which affects the threshold. At 0 dB it's flat, and at 6 dB per octave, the treble end of the threshold is lower to better match the typical spectrum of a song. Under the tilt is a switch labeled Control and Snap. Control is a fast attack, and Snap is a bit slower to let transients through. Next is the display, which shows 25 points that represent the center frequencies of the filters, and allows you to visualize the frequency range you're affecting and in what ways the material is being processed. Center and range set the location of the range being affected and the width of that range. Action is sort of like a ratio on a compressor. You use it to reduce the amount of processing taking place. And finally, the mission knob, which lets you select the algorithm you want to use. The missions are Tame, Control, Wake Up, Rotate, and Master. Instead of describing each one of these missions, I'll just show you an example of each one in action. The first mission we're going to take a look at is Tame. As the name might suggest, Tame is great for instruments where a note might jump out here or there, or like on a guitar or a bass, a lot of times certain notes will just ring louder on that instrument, being that they're acoustic instruments at heart, and because of the woods and things like that, certain notes are just louder than other ones. And Tame is great for keeping that kind of thing under control. Let's listen to this bass track I've got here. It's kind of unevenly played, and just the instrument itself has certain notes that are woofier than others, so. You can really see, like in this range here. See how woofy that note gets? So let's see what we can do with it with Tame. I'm just going to focus on the low end. First of all, I'm going to put this on Control because I don't really want any of the transients to get through. I want this to be like they just played it right the first time. Bring the range down, and I'm going to center it down here in the low end of the instrument. I'm going to put a little bit of tilt on this because I want to get some of the upper bass stuff. It's maybe a little more than I want to be taking off. Bring the makeup up a little. Let's go back and listen to that area with the woofy note again. And this is in bypass. Let's take a pass at it again with SoundBrigade on. Woofiness gone. And I haven't even done any compression or anything yet, and it's very natural sounding still, and if you still want to add some compression on, you can, and you're going to get better results from that compressor because certain notes aren't going to be working it harder than it needs to be. The next mission we're going to look at is Control. This is a pretty cool mission here. Basically what it does is anything that's above the threshold gets reduced, like it did with Tame, but anything that's below the threshold gets kind of SoundBrigade's version of upward compression. So you get a boost to anything that's below the threshold. It's kind of like a tilt EQ, and a multi-band compressor and a dynamic EQ all combined into one. It's great for instruments that are a little boomy and maybe a little dark. I've got this acoustic guitar track that really fits the bill. SoundBrigade is bypassed right now, so let's listen to this guitar real quick. See how some of the low notes are... They could use a little taming. And I'd like to hear more of the finger picking. I'd like the top end of the instrument to be coming through a little bit more. So let's see what we can do. I'm going to keep the tilt at 0 because I don't want the high end to get to go above the threshold. I want it to stay below so it gets boosted. I'm going to put the range at full. And I've got it on control. I'm going to put this also on control and not snap because I don't really want it to be a creative effect. I want it to sound more natural. And I'm going to go ahead and crank the threshold up to start out with. Now everything is getting boosted basically. I just want to bring it down so that low end gets under control too. It's just more alive sounding on the top end, and that bottom end is really tightened up. I love tools like this that take 3 tweaks and you get exactly what you want. The next mission we're going to look at is Wake Up. Wake Up is sort of like upward compression, or SoundBrigade's version of that. Anything that goes above the threshold gets boosted. This comes in handy with something like a drum loop, where you don't have access to the mix to turn up the kick drum or the snare drum if you want to. So using SoundBrigade, you can just kind of grab exactly what area you want to grab and give it a boost. Let's listen to this drum loop real quick. I'm going to bypass SoundBrigade. Now I'd like to hear more kick drum here, so let's take the range down pretty small, take it down into our kick drum area. Now you got some serious kick drum there. This is without. And with. Really gives you a lot more low end and punch. Now say we wanted to do the same thing with a snare drum. Gonna make it a little narrower so we're just getting the snare drum and not the top end of the kick. Still sneaking in there a little bit. Bringing out that snare drum a whole lot more though. You can also use Wake Up to bring out the top end of your snare drum rather than the punch. For that I'm going to crank the tilt up so we're getting more action from the high end. I'm going to leave it on snap. And I'm going to reduce the range down and bring the center up to where the snares are in that 7K area. Just without. Just adding a little crispness to the snare. And it's doing it without really affecting the cymbals or the hi-hat too, which is nice. Something that you wouldn't get with a regular EQ. The next mission we have to look at is Rotate. Rotate, I really can't find anything in common with any of the other missions. What it does is, rather than perform some sort of frequency-dependent compression or upward compression, what it does is it rotates the phase of the range that you have selected with the center and range controls, and gives you a really unique effect, especially on percussive material. So let's look at that same drum loop we just had. And check this out. You want to bring out some kick drum? This will bring out your kick drum. As far as I can tell, the threshold doesn't have anything to do with this. Not much different going on with the controlled snap either. It seems to just really be the range that affects this. So you can do that with your kick drum, turn it into an 808 basically, or you can do the same thing to your snare. The top end of your kick drum. I imagine this would probably be really cool on like a muted guitar part or maybe slap bass or something like that too. Again, it's not something I'm going to find a ton of use for, but I can imagine using it on that kick drum for that 808 effect here and there. Pretty cool. And the last mission we're going to look at is master, which, as the name might imply, is designed for mastering, although you can use any of these missions for whatever works. I've got it set to master, I've got the range to full, I've got this switch set to control because I don't want really to enhance any transients or anything. I've got the tilt at 6 dB per octave to better match the spectrum of the music. And right now the threshold is cranked up and we're just going to let the song play back and we will adjust the threshold until we get some movement here. What you want ideally is everything to return to 0. You want it to move when it needs to, but you want it to go back to neutral, and you don't want anything staying down in here the whole time. So let's see. You can see it just evens out everything. It keeps these little peaks from poking through, and it makes everything sound more controlled without being smashed like compression would do. So that's SoundBrigade. There really isn't anything else like this out there. It's a great way to keep things under control without sounding like you're doing anything. I would think, even though this was a rock example, and there's all kinds of uses you can find for it on material like this, I would think it would be ideal for genres like jazz and folk and classical, where you want it to sound as natural as possible, like you're not doing any processing at all, and you just capture everything perfectly, and the performances were all perfect. Go out there, get a copy of it, try it out. I think you'll find all kinds of uses for it, and you'll wonder how you got by without it. Thanks for watching.